Well, hello everybody out there in Atlanta. It's Chris from HHN.com with a little bit of a spontaneous sort of combo of my talking head and also the Fear the Beard HHN Chatcast. We're going to be talking about opening weekend for Halloween Horror Nights 27. I know I promised a Chatcast for when everything was revealed for Halloween Horror Nights 27, when we had all the nitty gritty, all the stuff that was being that was going to be presented for Halloween Horror Nights 27, but life got in the way. Storms got in the way, hurricanes got in the way, life got in the way. Did not find a way this time. So here I am. I decided that I was gonna go ahead and do one. I'm on vacation, so I said, why not go ahead and do one? Opening weekend has come and gone. We have quite a lot to talk about. I was doing an article on my website, and I decided, hey, why not? Why not? I just get on camera and I'll talk about it, and I'll post this. Hopefully Facebook is kind. I've been trying to avoid using Facebook for these because for whatever reason, Facebook is deciding that it's not going to frame my video the way that I shoot it. So it is what it is. Let me make sure that we are going here. I got a live feed, so that's good. So yeah, so we're good. We're so far so good. But anyway, all right, so I think I covered that intro and what I was going to be talking about. Whether or not you watch these live, you could always watch them later. I do try to put them on my YouTube channel. As long as Facebook decides that it's going to be kind and frame my video the way that I'm shooting it currently, then it'll go right up on YouTube a little bit later. And I'll go ahead and post those there, and I'll post them on the website as well. So, let's go ahead. Let's get it. I got my notes here. I am ready to go. Halloween Horror Nights 27 opening weekend. Let's get the elephant in the room tranquilized right away. Hurricane Irma. Hurricane Irma blew through here last week. Was it last week? Yeah, a week yesterday actually. It blew through Florida, and she was kind of a bitch. She was a bitch and was not kind to the state of Florida. I know there are probably some people that are still without power. That's been a major issue here in the Sunshine State. I did lose power. I lost power during the hurricane early. I lost power early during the hurricane. Got mine back on Tuesday afternoon. But there's a bar across the street from me. There is a bar across the street from me that I visit a lot. That is actually still without power. At least last I checked, still without power. The entire complex across the street is without power. So there are a lot of people that still have power. But anyway, Hurricane Irma came through and affected Halloween Horror Nights 27 a lot. There was a lot of stuff that was affected by the hurricane. Rock the Universe was cut a day short for the hurricane as well. Obviously when they prepare for the hurricane, they take things away so that things don't get blown around, things don't get destroyed. So a lot of the Scare Zone props were, of course, taken away. They take some stuff away also for Rock the Universe, of course, but Scare Zone prep work had to be halted basically because they had to take everything away. And then by the time the hurricane blew through late Monday, they literally had a day in between to get everything ready, or as ready as they could for employee preview, and then another day to sort of get everything back up and ready for opening night on Friday. So there wasn't a whole lot of time in between. So there were some Scare Zone issues because of Hurricane Irma. So I'm not really going to do a full detailed analysis on the Scare Zones because I'm still waiting to see even the Scare Zones that looked completed. I'm still waiting to see exactly what could not be ready in the Scare Zones. Obviously, Festival of the Deadliest is the one that suffered the most. In terms of Scare Zones, that was not ready at all. They did have, the actors in there rolling around, and they did have the props in there, the set pieces, but all the set pieces are not out. All the set pieces are not done, and even the set pieces that are there are not lit. So that entire Scare Zone is basically incomplete. So I'm not going to really judge the Scare Zones. I'll still give a ranking or whatever, but it's not going to be a how do I put this? A solid ranking of the Scare Zones, because they're even the Scare Zones that weren't done, like the Purge. The Purge was pretty much ready to go. They had the even though there were elements of the Purge that were missing, such as the wood chipper wasn't wasn't functional on Friday. I didn't see it on Saturday, but I know it wasn't functional on Friday. They sort of changed some stuff around on Sunday too. There are 2 cars that are covered in the Christmas lights. One of which was parked over in Delancey Street, and they actually moved the car on Sunday, and I think they moved it because the bread truck, of course, is back this year in the scare zone. Same as they had in the past, and it goes down Delancey Street. So I'm assuming that they decided, hey, let's move this out of the way so we have more room to roam around with the bread truck. So even the things that the scare zones that were completed, I think still had some, they were still behind on things, because of the hurricane. Obviously, the other big thing that was affected by the hurricane was Academy of Villains. Academy of Villains, their stage was, I don't know the extent of the damage, but they did a temporary show. They came up with a temporary show, basically brought to you by Irma, that was being performed on the front of, outside the Pantages Theater, outside the Monster Makeup Show over there. And I'm always, even last year, I was surprised and I was really excited about the passion these guys have of just basically going, they want to perform, they want to, they want to do what they can to perform. They have that bug. The show must go on, as they said, in the temporary show that they had. I don't exactly know when the stage is going to be back up. I'm hearing all sorts of things about this coming weekend, possibly not this coming weekend. I don't know. It depends. It really depends on what kind of damage that stage sustained because of the hurricane. Just looking at the surface, the only thing that I can see with my own eyes, I don't know about, the inner workings of the stage or whatever, but the tarp that covers the stage, I think may have been damaged, or they might have had to take it down. It looked like they were in the process yesterday and Saturday of maybe putting a new tarp on top of the stage. So I'm assuming that that is what the major issue is for the stage, but it could be something else. Could be something mechanical that we can't see, some kind of bar or something that that is not, that is causing them to not be able to put the stage up. But nevertheless, that was one of the other major blows because of Irma. Irma caused a lot of issues for Halloween Horror Nights 27's opening weekend. So even though I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do rankings and stuff like that of my current rankings of the houses, and I'll throw the scare zones in there too. The scare zones are going to change, especially Festival of the Deadliest, because it's not ready. So, even like Ultras of Horror, which is, I don't think I would like it even if they put, sets in there anyway. But I think that I think there might be more to Ultras of Horror that is not yet put out. I could be wrong. So there's the scare zones took a hit from Irma. So again, I'm not gonna really delve into the scare zones that much, because I'm going to give them a little bit of a week leeway on that. The houses, even though they were, they were ready to go, they were in there, they were completed, you could tell that they were also a little bit behind in some of the houses, but that's not a bad thing, because the houses, I'll get a little bit more into this in a little bit, but the houses were good. The houses were ready to go, even though they kept adding things that were, which they do anyway. Like Horror Nights always adds and subtracts things from houses, as the weeks go on. But there were a couple houses where you're like, wow, that's a major set piece, or this was, a major effect, or some kind of lighting, or, water effect or wind effect, or even actors being plugged in that weren't there the first 2 nights of the event, but were there on Sunday. So you can tell that they were still, putting things in that they didn't get a chance to put in right away on Friday or Saturday. So it is what it is. Hurricane Irma was a thing. It's no longer a thing, but it did affect opening weekend of Halloween Horror Nights. It was apparent. So I am going to give them a little bit more leeway with the opening of the event. Things should be a little bit more cemented next week, especially when it comes to Festival of the Deadliest. I thought, even though, it was not completed, sets and lighting and stuff was not there. There's a lot more to that zone that it's going to be put out here, I think, over the coming weekend. If you went into the Ash vs. Evil Dead house on Saturday, you saw props. There were obvious Festival of the Deadliest props that were being stored back behind Ash vs. Evil Dead that were not being put out yet. But the biggest issue, I think, for that zone currently is that they just didn't have time to light it. They didn't have time to light it, or the lights got moved around or damaged or whatever because of the storm. It is what it is. I think those were the only two major things that I saw with my own eyes, aside from some of the stuff in the houses that wasn't ready, that was affected by Hurricane Irma. Everything else seemed pretty much, as scare zone wise, everything else seemed pretty much what it was supposed to be, including lighting. Some show elements were still missing from the Purge over the course of the first 2 days, which they then have since added, such as the wood chipper and some of the stuff on that little construction zone thing. I saw some of that stuff last night. They still have not put back the Purge props that were, well, they could have put it back this morning. I haven't checked Twitter, nor have I been down to Universal, so I couldn't tell you. But as of yesterday, they still did not put out the Purge stuff that was that's in New York, the things that are covering the streets. That stuff was still not put back. Last year, for Halloween Horror Nights 26, you remember Matthew, when Matthew sort of breezed the coast. The tunnels, those tunnels to nowhere that were put up for Survive or Die, were taken away from Matthew and were never brought back. But that was more towards the middle of the event. So and the tunnels were basically useless. So when they took them away, for Matthew and never put him back, it didn't surprise me because they didn't really do anything. They didn't really serve the purpose that they were meant to serve in that scare zone. So so it doesn't surprise me that they didn't put him back. Now the Purge stuff, the props that were in the New York area that they did take away, I fully expect them to put those back at some point. If they don't come back by this coming weekend, there probably won't be back at all. I don't know why they would take them away permanently, but that's my guess. If they don't come back by this weekend, they probably won't come back at all. And honestly, the Purge, I'll get more into the Purge a little bit later, but the Purge scare zone really doesn't need it because it's got all the other show elements and stuff that are, on the main drag of New York, with the bread truck roaming around. That it doesn't really matter. The little props and stuff on the. Of course, it adds to the aesthetic of the scare zone. I'm getting messages from people on Facebook, but like the aesthetic of the scare zone, it doesn't really. Aside from just an aesthetic of the scare zone, it doesn't really make a difference, So even if they did get rid of it, it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't come back at all. So that's it for the Hurricane Irma stuff, because it was the event was affected by Hurricane Irma, no doubt about it. Anybody that says anything differently is lying or kidding themselves. That's not to say they didn't put on a great event or a great opening weekend. Even with the troubles of Irma. But you could still tell, both in the houses and the scare zones, that there were things that were affected by the hurricane. So like I said in my article on Friday morning, and I always give Horror Nights about a week post-opening weekend to sort of, fit into their groove a little bit, as things sort of progress and the actors get used to their roles and things are added and things are subtracted. Things that are not working they might take away, or approaches to to how the scare actors scare you in the houses are sort of tweaked, and everything changes. It evolves. It's a living play, basically. It's what it is. It's theater. It's living theater, on a daily basis. So things change, things are taken away, things are added. It is what it is. So I usually, as a rule of thumb, give them about a week to get everything in there. This year, though, I might have to give them a little bit more leeway because of because of the hurricane. So although I think by next weekend they should still even with the hurricane troubles, they should really be where they wanted to be opening weekend. But things will still change. It is what it is. It happens every year. So and I can't wait to see Academy of Villains. I can't wait to see their real show. Because the Hurricane Irma thing, they basically just did. They put that stuff together like within like 2 days. That little show that that they did put on was very quick. They didn't have a whole lot of time to put something together, but they did anyway, which I thought was really cool. Unlike, I think last year when Matthew, because Matthew took the stage down for them as well, and they did lose a day. It was a day or two on the main stage. They still performed, I guess, a shortened version or a watered down version of the show they had last year. This year, they just basically did an entirely new show, a short show that they had very little time to put together, and they did a really good job. So, but I can't wait to see their full show, which should be this coming weekend. But who knows? Maybe it won't be ready by Friday, but it could be ready by Saturday or Sunday. So who knows? Or Thursday rather. The event resumes this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, of course. So anyway, we'll move on from the Hurricane Irma stuff, and we'll start talking about the event itself. I'm hearing a lot of comparisons this year. Everyone is saying, or at least not everyone, but what's the word? The enthusiasm for the event this year. People are saying, it rivals 2015, right? 2015 was a very popular year. Mainly because of Jack, and it had an icon and things of that nature. It was also an anniversary year, so everyone loves Halloween Horror Nights 2015. I am not so much high up on 2015 as some people are. I don't think the collection of houses in 2015 was all that great. Of course, they had their standouts, but the houses for me in 2015 were very mixed. So when talking to a lot of people this year, the word, the scuttlebutt, the talk, the chatter is that it rivals 2015's year in terms of houses, or in terms of an overall event, right? There have been better events in the past than 2015. 2015 was good for an anniversary year. It did have its standouts, but if we're talking content, if we're talking scare zones and houses, 2015 is not the example. For me, my favorite collection of houses ever, Halloween Horror Nights, comes from 2011, Halloween Horror Nights 21, which ironically was another year that was put on by Patrick Braillard. Patrick Braillard was the showrunner in 2011. He is also the showrunner this year. That to me is the best collection of houses that Horror Nights has ever done. Even the one house that I did not like that year, which was The Thing, was still a solid house. But all the other houses were standouts, right? We're talking collection of houses this year. It comes close to that. There are two houses. One house which is like, okay, well, this has potential, and another house which is not very good, but still has some really solid elements to the house. So even when I go through and I rank everything, even though something could be on the bottom, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad house. Still has some really solid elements, some really good scares, some really good show scenes and things of that nature. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad house. There's really only one house this year that can be considered a bad house, if you want to put it down there. It could be a Blumhouse. But that's like the only one that's really, that I would consider like a bad house. So if you want to do a comparison in terms of strength of content, for me that comparison would go to 2011, not 2015. So far, 2017 is a better event than 2016. One of the biggest elements that was missing from 2016 was the streets. The streets were, for me, basically non-existent last year. 2015 also did not have the strongest of streets. So that's why I'm when people make this comparison about 2015, I'm like, well, I mean, the event, you know, had its problems. It had troubles, and the streets weren't very good, aside from one or two. So that sort of confuses me a little bit. But compared to last year, the streets this year are so much better. Even with the shit show that is Altars of Horror and the incomplete Festival of the Deadliest, the streets this year are just blow the streets out of the water compared to 2016. The other big thing, the other big element that's better than 2016 is that there's no fucking chance her laugh is not playing all across the park anymore. That annoying laugh is not there either. I've said in the past how I feel about icons. I don't really care about icons. I don't really care about overall arcing themes and whatnot. We have an unofficial icon, I guess you want to call them, in the shape of bone or whatever the guy's called over in Festival of the Deadliest. But I don't really care. As long as the event is put on in quality, the houses are good, the scare zones are good, the shows are good. I don't care about an icon. There's no need for an icon. You know, it's just another element that they throw into a scare zone or a show or into a house anyway, so it really doesn't make a difference. The icon is only there to sell the event. You know, just like the IPs are only there to sell the event. So I mean, there's I don't really care. But it's a really nice. It was so nice to walk around the park this past weekend and not hear that stupid laugh every 5 seconds coming over the loudspeaker, because that laugh is annoying. So it is what it is. But I would say that compared to last year, this is a much stronger event. The scare zones, you know, the so far the 3 completed scare zones are much better than any of the scare zones that were at the event last year. Because none of the scare zones last year were very good at all. I don't care what people say about Vamp 55. Vamp 55 is one of these things that the fanboys latch onto. You know, because you know they have they take these things sometimes and they sort of you know make it a thing, even though it's not really a thing, right? So Vamp 55, while it was a fun scare zone, it wasn't necessarily the best scare zone. It was definitely more in terms of like cast interaction and things like that. It was definitely a strong scare zone in that aspect of it, but just wasn't a very good scare zone. It was fun, but that's all it was. This year's scare zones are much better, much better than they were last year. There's a lot more thought put into these scare zones. There's a lot more, minus the shit show that is Altars of Horror. There's a lot more, you know, there's a lot more detail. I'll talk about pizza fries in a minute, but there are a lot more. There's just a lot more thought put into the scare zones this year than there were last year. You know, both in design, both in and also show elements and lighting. There's a lot more thought put into it this year. Like minus Altars of Horror, which is just nothing more than a photo op scare zone. And like I said, Festival of the Deadliest was not completed, so I can't judge that based on what I saw over the past weekend. So, but the 3 that are there, the three scare zones that are completed, because I'm not counting Altars of Horror, but the 3 scare zones that are completed are miles better than anything that was put on the streets last year. Just miles and miles and miles better than anything that we saw last year in the streets. I'll talk more about the scare zones when I get there, but Purge this year might be my favorite scare zone so far, and I'll get to why a little bit later. But I went off on a huge tangent there. We were talking about the comparisons to Howling Horror Nights 2015, which a lot of people seem to hold in this high regard. But again, if I was to give a scale of sort of how to judge something like this, especially based on the houses, I would definitely put 2011 in that conversation, not 2015, because 2015 did not have the best collection of houses. It had one or two houses that were standouts. Monsters of Mayhem, everyone talks about that one. But beyond that, there's not really a whole lot to talk about in terms of 2015. So you had American Werewolf in London twice. There's that. So if we're talking collection of houses, I'm still gonna judge overall collection of houses, with 2011, which in my view is still the best collection of houses we've ever had. Might not have been the best event we've ever had, but in terms of houses, that is where I will judge. That's my barometer for, okay, how do these houses stack up to 2011? Because those houses, even the worst one in my opinion, which was The Thing, was still a strong house, right? So as we get into the houses now, so that'll transition into the houses. I have my rankings in front of me, and of course everything is going to change. Everything already has changed. Last night was a very good run of houses. It was also very dead. It was like nobody in the park. So, that was good. So there were a couple houses there, especially towards the end of the night, where I was in there by myself. So that also helps. Or, not by myself per se, but within, a small cluster of people without a conga line in front or behind you. But there were definite changes compared to Friday and Saturday. You can see the evolution of some of these houses over the course of the 3 days. Whether or not they were done or completed, I don't know. But things were added, things were taken away throughout the course of the 3 days. So last night, Sunday, was actually, like I said, a very good run-through of houses. A lot of houses that I might have been, okay, well, this, I say this every year too. I don't care if you've got the biggest and best sets. It's not necessarily all about the sets, it's about the scares. How they scare you, the intensity of the house. I say my favorite word every year is energy. How much energy is in the house. It's not just somebody, that type of thing coming out and booing you from the boo hole. Set design, lighting, sound, scare actors, all that stuff has to flow to have a good energy in a house. And for me, right, all the houses this year, the really strong houses, have a good sense of that. But some just don't have the intensity that others have, which is why I was saying before about, the houses are all pretty solid, but some of them just don't have the intensity that others have. So there might not be a bad house, but just some houses that are just not scaring as well as other houses. And that'll change as time goes on. Last night, things changed in a couple of the houses that made things a little bit more intense. So I'm going to go through and I'll give my current rankings from the bottom to the top. So I talked about 2011, the one house in 2011 that I did not like, but was still a strong house. Even though I didn't like the house, I'm still a strong house. So this year, on the bottom of the list for me is Blumhouse, the Horrors of Blumhouse. We got to do this yesterday. This house has a lot of problems. So unlike 2011, where all the houses basically were strong, even the one that I did not like, this one can be considered a bad house in my opinion. This one is bad, right? It seems to me that they really wanted to do Insidious. They wanted to do an Insidious house. And somewhere along the line, probably whenever they decided to do Horrors of Blumhouse out in Hollywood, they said, hey, let's not do Insidious, let's do this. Let's do the Horrors of Blumhouse thing. And they might have been very, very, into the planning stages of Insidious, and then decided to throw that out at the last minute and then sort of force feed Sinister and the Purge into this house. The problem is that Sinister and Purge are literally one room for both. So you've got like one room for Sinister and one room for Purge, and then the 85% of the house is Insidious. So and not very well done Insidious. And we've seen Insidious at the event before and done really well. So when you go through the Insidious portions of the horrors of Blumhouse, it just doesn't live up to the Insidious house that we had back in 2015, which is a shame, because the only other thing that this house is hinging on is the Sinister and Purge elements, which are only literally 2 rooms in the house. So when you leave the house, you're left asking yourself, why not just do an Insidious house? Like, the Purge and Sinister stuff just didn't make any sense. Like, why is this even here? And you enter into the Insidious and Purge. So, spoiler alert for people that haven't done Horrors of Blumhouse yet, but you literally enter into Sinister and then make your way into Purge. But it's 2 rooms. It's literally 2 rooms. So 90% of this house is basically Insidious, and you're just left wondering, why not just do an Insidious house as a purge, as opposed to forcing, Sinister and the Purge into this. It just didn't make any sense. And the elements that they have in there, because honestly, like, if I'm being honest, the Insidious stuff was okay, but it wasn't as good as the Insidious house that we had in 2015, right? One of the more interesting elements to Horrors of Blumhouse for me was the Purge room, because it was different. There was a very intriguing aspect to the Purge room that we got, and I was like, oh, and then you enter into Insidious. So I was like, I want more of that, as opposed to just getting the all the rest of the Insidious stuff, which wasn't really good to begin with. It all kind of felt thrown together. And the finale room in this is just weird. The end to the house is just bizarre. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's even more confusing than why would you put, literally force Sinister and the Purge. It just didn't make any sense. It's just like, why did we even do this? Like, just do Insidious. If you want to do Insidious, just do Insidious, instead of literally doing, a room or a room and a half of Sinister and the Purge. I don't know. But this to me would be considered a bad house. This is a bad house. Although some of the stuff in the Purge room and Insidious was actually quite good. There were some good elements to, especially Sinister. There were some good elements to the Sinister stuff. And like I said, I like the Purge room, but there just wasn't enough of it. There just wasn't. It's literally 2 rooms, and you go into Insidious. The rest of the house is all Insidious. So it is what it is. But this one I would consider a bad house. There are elements in place in here that could improve the house. In other words, the pieces are in place to actually have the actors step up and make it a more intense house, as opposed, because it doesn't have the best sets in the world. And the lighting is weird. It's pretty much all strobes and things of that nature. So, but I mean, there are elements in here that can make it a pretty decent house, but it's just not there. And the confusing nature of 90% Insidious, and here's 2 rooms with the Purge and Sinister, like, okay, whatever. So it's not a good house. We'll just leave it there. I gotta do a couple more runs of it though, because like I said, there are elements there that could make it a decent house in terms of scares, but the rest of it is just not there. So anyway, so let me go up to Hive, and I know Hive's been getting a lot of flack. So Hive would be number 8. So Hive's been getting a lot of flack this past weekend, and of course, I think most of us know that Hive wasn't supposed to be Hive anyway. But for what they had, to do, I thought set-wise and, story-wise, I thought was actually kind of interesting. It's dark. It's a really, and not just in terms of lighting, it's a dark story as you're entering through. Everyone has been talking about the babies. There are these babies in a crib. These skeleton babies or whatever in a crib. There's some dark shit in the Hive. My main issue with this house is that it's repetitive. There's not a whole lot of variety in here. They throw in a lot of the ash piles and a lot of coffins, and a lot of the scare tactics are very much the same. There's not a whole lot of variety in terms of this house. But what does work in this house are the actors. And I say again every year, I'm going to say it again, I said it earlier, I don't care if you have the biggest sets in the world, the most elaborate sets in the world, or the worst sets in the world. Universal House of Horrors is a good example of that. Not necessarily the best sets in the world from a couple years ago, but good scare actors in there, good tactics to scare you in there. So you don't have to have the best sort of sets or anything like that. It's all about the actors and what they bring to it. And Hive actually has that. Hive actually has, they don't have the best sets in the world. They don't have the best, all the best in that house. But yesterday specifically, the actors were really intense in there. So there's a lot of potential for this house to be really, really good. It's just you're not going to be able to get over the repetitive nature of the house. But the actors are they seriously, like last night was a really cool run through of Hive. It looks like they're starting to find some unique ways to do things, even though things are a little bit repetitive. They are starting to find a little bit of a groove in terms of how they scare you. I've heard a lot of people talk about the eyes in this house. Both times that I've gone through the house, I didn't see any glowing eyes. I don't know if I just missed them or what. But there were no glowing eyes in this house. But again, trying not to get off on a tangent, the actors do a good job in here. They're really, really, really trying hard to scare you. I posted on Twitter yesterday as like, I tried to find a little participation meme to put on Twitter for Hive, because they're trying to make something that might not be the best thing into something that could be fun and scary. And they did a really good job on Sunday. Even though the design elements of this are just very repetitive, and that for me is the worst offender of that house, is that it is repetitive. I do like how some of these houses too. Hive is a good example of the close quarters. There's a lot of really tight spaces and stuff that make for extra scary elements in the houses, and Hive does have those elements as well. But it's all about the actors in here for me. If they can keep bringing that level of intensity that they brought yesterday, then Hive could shoot up on a list, because, man, I keep going out of focus. I mean, Hive could shoot up on my list because of the actors. The actors are bringing a lot of intensity to this house, and I like the design. I like the design, the Nosferatu looking vampires. I mean, when the description of this house was first brought out, one of the things that stood out to me was the description of the vampires. I'm very much a classic sort of vampire kind of guy. I love my Nosferatus. I love my Draculas, my Lugosi Draculas. None of these newfangled vampires, but no sparkly vampires, in other words, or underworld vampires. I don't like those vampires either. But yeah, so I like the design elements here. The storyline is a little bit hard to follow in here as well. But still, again, the actors are what bring it for me in here. And not a bad house. Again, talk about 2011. It's a strong house because of the actors. The actors are doing a lot to bring up this house's intensity. So even though, it might not be the best overall in terms of sets or design or lighting, it's still a pretty intense house because of the actors. So not a bad house, but not a super duper great house. And of course, the facade, I know everyone's talking about the facade, if you want to call it a facade, the little Hive scrim that's out front. I don't know if that was a victim of Hurricane Irma as well. They could have had a facade, that was ready to go to put up for the house. but they just ran out of time, or they had something that was already back there that might have gotten destroyed. We'll probably never know. Unless next weekend we get there and there's a facade that's put up for Hive, we might never know. Why they chose to put the stupid scrim, the Halloween 2 scrim, as I called it over the weekend. Although it's a little bit different than Halloween 2. This is just a plastic, thing for Hive. But I don't know. I mean, we could show up next weekend. And there could be a full facade in front of Hive. They might have ran out of time because of Irma. Irma might have screwed up their timeline so much that they were not able to put the facade out in time. I don't know, but again, I don't hate the house. It's not a bad house. There's a lot of really cool elements in Hive. It's just not totally gelling yet. But it's a cool house. I do enjoy the house. I went through Hive on Sunday pretty much by myself, and that was kind of scary to be in there by yourself. The first night or second night, I think on Saturday, I had one of my best scares in Hive. There's an element where the hallway is a hallway that's like really full with fog, and there's like a hole in the wall that's off to the right side. And as we were walking through, I couldn't see the hole because of the fog. The fog sort of covered the hole, and whoever was in that hole scared the crap out of me. So I mean, it was because I didn't see him because of the fog. So I had one of my best scares in Hive so far this year. So there's a lot of potential in there, and the whole creepy nature, the whole creepy vibe of Hive. It gets under your skin a little bit. So I mean, the elements are there. And I don't hate the house. I don't hate it as much. Some people just downright hate this house. I don't hate it as much as some other people do. So, but a lot of potential. So we'll move on. Number 7, we're going to go to The Shining. Over the first couple of days, The Shining was the first house that I did this year. Halloween Horror Nights 27. I like the house. The design of the house is really cool. I like how crazy this house is because it sort of mimics the craziness of Jack Nicholson's, Jack Torrance. There's a lot of really cool elements in here. There's just not a whole lot of scares in here, which is my main problem with this house, is that it's more about the aesthetics in here. Unlike, say, like a Dead Waters, which we'll get to a little bit later, Dead Waters has the aesthetic. It also has the scares. This one doesn't have the scares. It's got the aesthetic. You're walking through the film, which is really cool. But there's just not a whole lot of scares happening here, which is upsetting. But for what they have in there, it works really well. Yesterday's run through, we did the Stay and Scream. Again, we always do Stay and Scream, but we did the Stay and Scream yesterday, and we went through The Shining first. But they were doing shooting in The Shining, and it sort of delayed us from going inside the house. And then when we actually did go inside the house, there was something missing, from the house. So I don't know if they put all the actors in the house to do the shooting, and then they just took them out right away, and then they ushered everyone into the house, and it wasn't, there were things that were missing. I don't know, but it's gone down for me over the past couple. And then I did it twice yesterday. Actually, I did it at the earlier part of the night, and then I did it as we were walking out of the event, which was scary as hell because we had like 4 minutes left. And there was nobody in the house. It was just us. It was just there were 4 of us that were walking through at the end of the night. There was it was really creepy. It was really creepy walking through all that shit without anybody in there. But in terms of scares, there weren't a whole lot of scares. It was just creepy. It's a creepy house because of all the crazy aesthetics and things of that nature. If you're not familiar with The Shining, I don't think you would actually like this house as much as somebody who might love The Shining, because it is The Shining. You're walking through The Shining. but you might be a little confused, which when I get to one of my other houses later on, could also be a problem too. But yeah, if you're not familiar with The Shining, you might not enjoy it as much. Very pretty house to look at, just not a whole lot of scares yet. I'm sure they'll work on that as they go on. Also, some missing. You can tell there were parts of the house that were supposed to have scare actors that didn't have scare actors, even during a full cast, that were not there. So you can tell that there'll be more stuff added probably next week and as we move on, through the course of the event. So moving on to number 6, because I'm probably this Facebook is gonna kick me off probably. But number 6, I'm gonna go with Saw. I've done Saw twice now. Lots of scares in here, especially last night. I love the sets in here too. For something that's in the Shrek theater, it's really our first real house that we've sort of had in here. Well, no, I guess Krampus. I forget Krampus all the time because I hate Krampus. but we had the 3D house the year before last year in 2015. Last year we had Krampus, but the sets in here feel like real sets. There's like Krampus. Krampus had the house, but it was very familiar. Like it was very repetitively familiar as you were going through. So there wasn't a whole lot of variety to the sets. The bathroom set alone from Saw 1, that's towards the end of the house, I was surprised at how open it was. It felt like you were going, walking into a soundstage house, or there was a lot of room in there. And it sort of surprised me a little bit because I don't think we've seen something that was that wide open yet in the Shrek building. And it felt like it was, a little bit more elaborate than what probably should be in the Shrek building. But I actually quite enjoyed this house last night. They had a lot of really good scares. Of course, the traps. I've talked about it before. I stopped watching Saw for I think it was, I stopped on the 3rd movie or the 4th movie, and I went back before Horror Night started and I watched all the Saw movies from 1 to 7. And the main thing about these films is the traps. People love the traps, and they're all the good ones are represented here, as they should be. But I was surprised last night they added more actors here last night too, and it felt more full, felt more complete, and the energy was a lot better than what we had the night before. There's the energy word again. There was a lot of energy in this house, and the actors were trying to scare you here, and the environment was cool, like the sort of gritty environments of Jigsaw's warehouses and stuff. Like they really got the movies well. They did the films well. They did the films justice, and the house, it worked for me. This house worked for me a lot more than say like The Shining, and I was surprised because I don't like the Saw films. But last night's run through was actually very solid. They worked hard to scare you last night, and like I said, they added more people, and I love the room at the last room before you exit the house. I guess is the preview for the new Jigsaw film that's coming out in October. I don't know what the hell is going on in that room, so I mean that's why it's a little bit lower on the list, because I just don't know. There's no punch to the exit. At least I haven't seen, aside from just looking at the room, which I'm already confused about. What exactly is happening in there, because I haven't seen. I don't know what the trap is, so I haven't really seen what's going on with my eyes in the new film. So it's a little confusing. I'm like, oh, well, I recognize that. I recognize that. I recognize that. I recognize that. What the hell is this? But it was cool. I guess it was cool to look at, but I just don't know what's going on in that room. But other than that, I think it's a really solid house. Surprisingly, a really solid house for me. I quite like Saw. It went up It went up from Friday, from our, I think we did it on Saturday night. It went up from Saturday night's run last night. They did a really good job. This was towards the end of the night too, which normally, sometimes you go into these houses towards the end of the night and there's like no actors in there or whatever. No, they did a really good job last night. It was about, I want to say I went in there about like 12:40ish last night, and they did a really good job. I was very, very surprised with Saw. So hopefully Saw can continue that level of intensity. Like I said, not a bad house either. There's no bad houses this year. Everything is. I think this year is going to be a very depending on what houses that you like, it's going to be very much dependent on your tastes this year, as opposed to a house just being flat out bad. Because Blumhouse is the only one that really is flat out bad, in my opinion. So I think there's going to be a lot of taste house rankings this year. A lot of if it doesn't suit your taste, then you're not going to like the house. So, but moving up on the list now is American Horror Story. American Horror Story, the first night that we went through it, was not a very good run through. I was not pleased with American Horror Story because I was not a fan of the house last year. Last year, the house suffered from lack of actors. It's a giant house. It's a big house. It's the Uber house. There's a lot of space to fill in those giant big houses. And the main issue that I had with American Horror Story last year was that there weren't enough actors in there. Or at least the actors weren't being plugged into the right places. So there was a lot of dead space as you're walking through the house. Yeah, look, pretty sets. But like I said earlier, I don't really... The sets are nice, but you need to scare me, right? You still need to scare me. Like, I look at the sets, 5 ways till Sunday, but if I'm not being scared, it doesn't matter. Last night's run-through was completely different than the run-through we had on Saturday night. More actors, better scares, the tactics to scare you in here that we didn't catch the night before were really, really, really well done. The Coven stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of Coven, but last night's run-through of American Horror Story, Coven was scary, man. That shit was on point last night. I really like the Coven aspect of this. My favorite season of American Horror Story is Asylum. I don't think they did Asylum justice here. I don't know what the hell's happening in the Roanoke stuff because I didn't see Roanoke. But a lot of good stuff happening in the Roanoke part of the house last night. So Coven was the best part of that last night, and Roanoke was really intense as well. So I really enjoyed American Horror Story last night. It jumped up from my first run through from the night before. They populated the house well last night. So really enjoyed American Horror Story. It might actually start creeping up even more the more I go into the house. We'll see. They can keep up that level of intensity that we had and fix Asylum. Then it might go up a little bit higher on the list because I love Asylum. So very, very surprised with American Horror Story. A lot of really cool sets in here, of course. It is the Uber house. No surprise there. The Asylum stuff looks good. One of the scare actors, I can never remember the character's name, but the woman from Asylum that has like the bald head and it's got the little ponytail. She scared me good in the Asylum part last night, which I appreciate because I love Asylum, and I can never remember the character's name on the show. But they need to work on Asylum a little bit. If they can work on Asylum and keep up the intensity and make sure that the house is populated by actors, then it could potentially be a favorite of mine, which is interesting if you know me. So, but we'll see. American Horror Story, great run through American Horror Story last night. Towards the end of the night too. That was the second to last. We went through American Horror Story and then coming out, we still had like 4 minutes left and we ran through The Shining again as we were leaving. But yeah, so American Horror Story, really good, solid run through. I struggled with 4 and 5 here. So going past American Horror Story, going up to 4 is Ash vs. Evil Dead. Now, I made mention of The Shining, and I said, if you're not familiar with The Shining and you go through The Shining, you'll probably be very confused. Very, very similar situation with Ash vs. Evil Dead. And when I talk about, this year probably having a lot to do, your enjoyment of the house is really going to be about taste, like what your favorite taste is. Ash vs. Evil Dead, I love the show. I love the films. If you don't know what's going on, you could very well not like the house. I think you can still get enjoyment out of Ash vs. Evil Dead as opposed to, like, say, The Shining, because Ash vs. Evil Dead is a it's all about the comedy. It's a funny house. It is the so-called comedy house this year. So there's a lot of really funny elements to it. If you don't have a very goofy sense of humor, you might not like Ash vs. Evil Dead at all, even though it is a funny house. It is the funny house. But I really thoroughly enjoyed this house a lot. The run through last night, they added a lot of extra stuff to Ash vs. Evil Dead, so that was a welcome surprise. A lot of really cool scares in here. I love the Bruce Campbell elements. Like, I was a little disappointed that we didn't actually go into the cabin here, but I like the show scene of the cabin with Ash coming out, him coming out saying his line or whatever, and then the girl off in the corner, as you're walking by. Ash is in the butt, of course. That's there. If you have not seen Ash vs. Evil Dead, season 2 especially, that comes from that season. That whole room I thought was very funny. Like, I've seen the show, so that stuff is the colon is on the wall right before that part. If you listen closely, you can hear the fart noises, which is very funny. It sprays you with water as you're walking by. They added in that scene as well. At least I didn't see it on the first 2 nights. But in the hospital room, they actually added the Necronomicon in one of the in the corpse, sticking out of the corpse. I didn't see it the first 2 nights. It could have been there. Maybe I just noticed it last night. But they added, or I think they added, the Necronomicon sticking out of the corpse. Which in the second season, that's why Ash is in the morgue. In the first place, is to get the book out of the corpse, and hilarity ensues with colons and buttholes. So Ashy Slashy, of course, at the end. That's a nice little treat. He's not actually in the house. He's just a little punch at the end as you're walking out of the house. A little puppet. Overall, very solid house. I love his house. Not the end all be all of scares. I've noticed that since Friday, the scare factor has gone down a little bit. I don't know why, but it's just not as scary as it was on Friday, which is why it went down a little bit on the list for me. But still a very solid house, very very fun house. It is a very fun house, and I love that because I love the show, and that's the show. It's literally like walking into the show, just like The Shining and American Horror Story. It's like walking into these properties. But like The Shining and maybe even American Horror Story, if you're not familiar with the material, you might not like the house as much. I think American Horror Story can get away with it, where you don't have to really know that much about the show to get what's going on in the house. But something like The Shining or the humor of Ash vs. Evil Dead, if you're not a fan, you're probably not going to like the house, no matter what they do. So, but I love Ash vs. Evil Dead. So moving on, one that shot up on the list last night was Scarecrow. Scarecrow the Reaping. Really intense last night. Very, very intense. You want to talk about in close quarters. Talk a little bit about the Hive, about how close quarters some of these houses are this year, and Scarecrow, very, very close quarters. But last night, very, very intense. Very intense. This house is already creepy. This house has a huge creep factor to it. Almost just like the Hive. But this one has an even worse creep factor to it, if that's even possible. And just the close-knit, a lot of really inventive scares in here, too. The camouflage of the burlap stuff, with the scarecrows coming out at you, like the scare actors coming out at you through the burlap. All that stuff done really well. That one room, there's a room towards the end of the house. I don't even know what it would be called. But it's almost like a mixture of the Exorcist room from last year and going into the further in Insidious, where you go through like this one room that's completely dark, and you hear crows, going off on the speakers, and there's air cannons that shoot at you and stuff like that. That shit's creepy. Like, it's really, really creepy house, and a great run through of it last night. Very, very, very intense. This is the number one house for a lot of people this year. I hear a lot, all the original properties are strong this year. But I think, like I said, I think all the houses are strong houses, minus Blumhouse. But this is at the top of a lot of people's lists this year. Now, it hasn't reached that peak yet, but it already did climb up the list last night. So we'll see if they can keep this going as we move forward. But a very, very intense run through of it last night. So much so, again, because it wasn't that busy last night either. And towards the end of the night, I was actually doing a lot of houses by myself. I was walking around the event by myself. So I was with strangers in these houses, and I got to talking with the group that was in front of me as we were waiting in line, and they were beyond out of their minds. Now, of course, these people, they don't go. A lot of these people don't go to the event as often as we do, as us super fans go to the event. And I think they were from. It was somewhere up north. They weren't from here. They were from some. I want to say Michigan. I think they were from Michigan. They were visiting from Michigan, and we got to talking about different how much Halloween, how much this time of year is different up north than it is down here. Halloween, and we talked about the haunted hay rides and pumpkin patches and things of that nature, and they were out of their minds going through this house. I mean, it really got to them good, and we were basically again in this house pretty much by ourselves. It was myself and maybe 4 other people walking through this house, and that's even creepier. I mean, this house is already creepy, but now you're in this house by yourself, which is creepy in itself. So, Scarecrow the Reaping, really, really good run through the house last night. I really hope we can keep this up because it might shoot up even farther. So we'll move on to number 2, and that's Dead Waters. Dead Waters is a fantastic house. The facade alone, everyone's going to be talking about this facade. Just like I said back with American Werewolf, people are going to be talking about those puppets for years to come. Same thing with the stupid facade in Dead Waters. People will be talking about the facade for a long time. Probably one of the best facades that Horror Nights has ever done for a house. Fits the tone well. It sets the vibe. It sets the scene. And of course, right away as you enter into the house, into the riverboat, you're in the forsaken part, sort of where you're kind of tilted to the end and it's listing, and a couple of actors in this stretch of the house as well. Same makeup as the Dead Man's Wharf characters from last year, which was really funny. But great facade, great sets in this house, fantastic lighting, probably one of the most beautiful houses that Horror Nights has ever done. But again, I said before, pretty sets, pretty lights, yes. But I'm just not getting the scares in this house that I'm getting with my number 1 house. The energy is a little bit off in this house as well. It's towards the middle of the house, things sort of I don't want to say die, but it sort of deflates a little bit. Like once you get past, I believe it's the open part. Like once you get past the one little open part there, and you go into the where you actually see the Voodoo Queen and whatnot. I got to go through this house because some of the scenes are a little bit twisted in here. I can't remember if you go through the riverboat, and then I think once you get out of the riverboat, I think that's where you go into the open area. There's a little, almost like what Ghost Town had last year, except on a smaller scale. You go to the bayou area, the actual bayou, and then you go into where the Voodoo Queen is, and then there's the end part where you've got the repetitive sort of the doors or whatever, the fake false doors where the people pop out from behind you. It sort of loses its punch once you leave the riverboat part, if that makes any sense. and it sort of kind of dies as you continue going in terms of the intensity, as you keep going out through the end of the house. So that's why this is a little bit farther down, or number 2 on the list as opposed to number 1 currently. Things always change, but yes, still a great house. One of the best houses of the year. Some people might say it's the house of the year. Some people might. I see there seems to be a lot of back and forth between Dead Waters fans and people who really love Scarecrow Reaping as the best house of the year. But this, for me, it's just the scares in here, even though I'm not getting the scares that other people are getting in this house to make it the number 1, still better scares in Dead Waters than I got in Scarecrow the Reaping. Although, like I said, the scares last night in the Reaping were very good. We'll see if they can continue that trend as we go forward throughout the event. But still scares in here. I'm not saying there weren't good scares in here, but just not the same amount of scares as I got in my number 1, which is The Fallen. I was very surprised at how much I liked this house. I talk about energy all the time. I talk about flow. I talk about the vibe inside of a house. The moment you walk into The Fallen, that energy is there, and that energy does not let up. Even though I know some people are complaining about, it's supposed to be angels versus demons. There are no angels in here. Who cares? I don't think that the normal person, unless they read the little blurb on the website or whatever, even knows there's supposed to be angels in here. It looks like demons have taken over. You're either in hell or they've taken over a church, and it comes it comes through that way in the house. But from the moment you enter that, the energy is there. The music, the lighting, the scares, the intensity of the scares, the intensity of the house, all that stuff maintains as you go throughout the house. It's got the set design to look at, like Dead Waters has. It's got the scares, but it's got it a little bit more. The like I said, the energy is there, the flow is there. The actors are really making this something more than And again, I'm not saying that Dead Waters doesn't have the scares, but it's just better done here. Of course, you've got the people on the bungees and stuff. A lot of really inventive scares in this house, which is great. I love the facade to this house. They use the sort of from Halloween 2 last year, how they made the walls look like they were burning after Laurie blows up the causes the thing to go on fire. They use that effect to the outside of the facade to make it look like there's the parts of it are smoldering, which is really cool. But I love this house. I love this house. Did it twice yesterday. I did it Saturday for the first time, and then I did it twice yesterday. We'll see if they can keep up that intensity throughout the entire course of the run of Halloween Horror Nights 27. But right now, edges out Dead Waters for me and Scarecrow in terms of scares. I love this house. I really hope they can keep it up throughout the entire course of the event. So anyway, so that's the houses. We'll quickly go through the scare zones. Like I said, I'm not going to really judge the scare zones because I don't know how complete they are. We already know about Festival, but I don't know how the rest of everything is if it's complete. Like I said, they were adding stuff to the Purge yesterday, which brings me. I'll go. We'll do Altars. I'm not even going to talk about. That is not a scare zone. I don't care. If they put sets in there, it doesn't matter. It's not a scare zone. So I could care less about Altars of Horror. Number 4, I put Festival because at least they tried. Compare Festival of the Deadliest to Altars of Horror. Festival Scare Zone's not even done, and it's still 100 times better than whatever Altars of Horror is. There's just way more elements in Festival of the Deadliest, even with with the Scare Zone it's not even lit, for God's sakes, but it's still better than anything they have in Altars of Horror. So number 4 is Altars of Horror. Number 3 is Trick or Treat. Again, aesthetically, gorgeous aesthetically. Not a whole lot of scares in here, but gorgeous aesthetically. Really, really nice to just walk around. But there's another one that I like even better, and that's Invasion. I love the weird vibe to Invasion. They really seem to be embracing that sort of campy sci-fi 50s feel or whatever. Of course, the UFO. The tall aliens, I think, are really cool. Really creepy and sort of, still kind of, paying homage to that sort of creepy alien, from the old school 50s horror films and stuff like that. I love Invasion. It's a really good zone to just sit back and sort of, watch and take pictures and things of that nature. But number one's The Purge. I said it in my so far it's The Purge, but I said it in my video where I talked about the original content. I like the Purge Scare Zone. The Purge Scare Zone, back then, it lends itself to Halloween Horror Nights. So they tried to duplicate it as best as they could last year with Survive or Die. Survive or Die was basically The Purge, but in like a post-apocalyptic environment, because the Purge, the elements worked when they had it the year before, and it works now. And they've added elements this year, which is fantastic. The little show elements they have this year are a little bit more intense too. The Purge auction, which I watched the not the female but the male one last night. I've noticed that they were a little bit more like vulgar than they were back in the with the original auction. It was a little weird. I don't get I don't get offended or anything like that, but I was a little taken aback by how much they went there, if that makes sense. It was very interesting. It was a little bit more than what I was anticipating. But the auction, of course, is fun. The wood chipper was working yesterday. You will get wet. The water effects that come out of the wood chipper, it's not just a spray. They have like these 3 tubes of water shoot out far too, like thick tubes of water that shoot out far into the streets once they put the bodies in the wood chipper. If you have your camera out, you're not expecting it either. You might be in for a little bit of a surprise. I love the bread truck. The bread truck, I said, in the Scare Zone thing from before, I was hoping that they brought it back. They did bring it back. It doesn't interfere with anything else either, with the wood chipper or whatever. Still the same thing. And again, like I said before, a little bit kind of more intense than what they did the first time around. I wonder if that'll stay. There's some stuff this year, with whether it's in the scare zones or whether it's in the houses. You got to sit back and you got to question that, somebody's going to ultimately complain about this. And they'll probably be taken out at some point in some of these houses. Some of the more mature themes of houses, such as in Ash vs. Evil Dead, or even some of the more intense elements of The Purge. There's in today's age, you can't help but wonder if somebody will cave up at the higher ups, the suits, will cave because somebody complains about something. So, but anyway, so I've covered everything. I did want to make mention, of course, everyone's talking about the alcohol this year. Alcohol is a big deal this year. I guess it is every year, but the controversial queue line at Finnegan's that showed up this year. I said it last year. Last year and the year before, there were a lot of operational things, not necessarily stuff that was being put on by the event, but just general operational things that were weird. Like rules and things that were being put into place, or changes to how things flow. There are a lot of flow changes this year, especially when it comes to queue lines, for one reason or another. I won't get into those here, but the operational changes that have happened over the past couple of years, some of them do leave you scratching your head. Like, why in the world why do this? Like, there's no reason why you should be doing it the way that you're doing. I don't partake in alcohol, like liquor. I drink beer, but it's very rare that I drink liquor. On Friday night, I actually got I got a few of the mixed drinks because I wanted the new cup, the square cup or whatever. But I'm not one to walk into Finnegan's and order a shot of Jameson or order, a rum and coke or whatever. That's not. I don't care about that. What I find what bothers me about the queue line in Finnegan's is some of us who've been going to the event for a long time and people who go to Universal all the time, we prefer to go into Finnegan's because of the bartenders, because we like the bartenders in there. Not necessarily because we want to drink our lives away, but we want to go and say hi to the people that are the regular bartenders that are at Finnegan's. I don't the queue line is weird to me because if their goal here is to get people to stop drinking as much, right? So you've got the some of the tents out in the some of the temporary beer tents and cart tents and stuff, liquor tents out in the streets have been taken away. Ones that used to you'd be able to walk up to a tent and get a mixed drink, get a rum and coke or something along those lines. Those have been taken away. And the quote-unquote the only place in the park that you'd be able to do that is Finnegan's, although there's a hidden one over by in the San Francisco area where you can still get mixed drinks if you want to. That's not in Finnegan's, and it's usually no one's ever over there. But if the goal is if their thinking is like, okay, if we put a queue line here, people won't wait for drinks, right? So it curbs back on people going into Finnegan's all night to get your hard liquor as opposed to just beer. If their line of thinking is people won't wait in line, then they're really underestimating drunks because people will wait in line to get their liquor. So I don't see the purpose of a queue line. People are still hanging out at the bar when they go up and get their drinks. I haven't seen. I went in yesterday. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. I waited in line and I went up and I got my beer and I left. But there were people that were still waiting at the bar. So I don't hanging out at the bar. So I don't know I don't know what the thinking is behind this, other than they're trying to get people psychologically say, well, I'm not waiting in a line to get a rum and coke or a shot of Jameson, so I'm going to go this way. But I think one of the other real reasons behind this is I don't think that this is a safety thing at all. I don't think they give a shit about people drinking too much liquor. I think part of this is a could be a money thing. So in the park, we get rid of the tents that sell these mixed drinks, right? These other, your rum and cokes and your other things like that. But what's still there? The $12 specialty mixed drinks that they're selling at the tents. So, it's like now it's like, okay, well, they have to buy the $12 mixed drink now, our specialty drinks that we have for Howling Horror Nights, as opposed to, going into a Finnegan's and getting a shot of Jameson or getting a rum and coke or whatever. I mean, that's the cynic in me is saying, well, that makes sense because you've taken away other bar carts, beer tents and stuff that have these other drinks. People aren't buying your $12 mixed drinks, your specialty mixed drinks that you have at the carts. So now you get rid of those, and you have literally one place in the park that sells other drinks. So now people who want liquor, not beer, are being forced to buy your $13 mixed drink that you have at these carts. So that's kind of the cynic in me is saying, well, I don't know if it really is because of they don't want people to drink as much. I think some of it is because they're forcing people to buy these $13 mixed drinks that they have as opposed to going in and buying a shot of Jameson. I think that's again, the cynic in me is saying that's the purpose behind all this, and not necessarily because they don't want to they want to keep people from drinking liquor. They just want you to buy their $14 mixed drink that they have as opposed to walking in and buying a nondescript rum and coke, for $6. They're forcing you to go to the tent to buy their $14 mixed drink as opposed to the $6 shot of Jameson they're going to get at Finnegan's. I don't know. It's a weird situation. Of course, the Jello shots are gone as well. That's the other thing. They nixed the Jello shots. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there has been. I'm not saying there's a problem with people drinking at the event. I think that there's a problem with people who don't know how to act when they drink. That is a problem. But I don't see everyone's. All the people that I partake in beer when I'm there. I try not to go overboard, but I know my limits and I stop when when it's time. But I don't see horror nights ever surviving without alcohol. I mean, I know people compare Hollywood. Hollywood's a dry event. Hollywood's a completely different event than Orlando. As a matter of fact, this past weekend they introduced alcohol into the event, so you can go down to Duff Gardens and buy a beer at the Hollywood event. So it is what it is. I mean, it's going to be it's one of those more controversial issues for this year. But anyway, so that's it. I went a little bit over my hour time here, so that I like to keep these two. But I was going over opening weekend, so it is what it is. Be back out there, guys, on Thursday. I'm going to do a little bit of a quick article here for opening weekend, and then I'll see you guys Thursday. All my photos, I've been putting some photos up on Twitter. You can see all the photos and videos and stuff that I take at Halloween Horror Nights at the website, on the Halloween Horror Nights 27 page on the website under the Photos tab. Those will all be there. And that's it. That's it. So that's it. Opening weekend's over. We move on to the second week of the event. Really solid year. It's a very solid year. It's still too early for me to judge what kind of a year it is, how solid of a year it is, but it is a solid year. So, like I said, the houses are all very strong. Even the ones that aren't the greatest houses, like Hive or The Shining or Saw, are still very solid houses. So, and we'll wait to see what the scare zones bring us in the coming weeks. So that's it for me, guys. Let me go ahead and do this real quick before I get off here. So I'll be back out there Thursday. Still on vacation. Yay, vacation. Although I think I got like a post-opening weekend cold, so that's not too good. I go out and get some medicine here. My throat's killing me. But anyway, guys, I'll talk to you guys later. Like I said, solid year. But anyway, that's it, guys. Talk to you later.